Yes. All right. Hello, everyone. So it's Lindsay, and today we're going to have Becky again, and then we're also going to have my friend Jamela come on today. So, Jamela, I just wanted you to take a minute to just introduce yourself to the people out there that end up watching this.
Oh, wow. That put like a lot of pressure, like the people.
It's like 5
Like,
people.
so, hello to the 5 of you. I'm Jamela. I am an applied researcher at a nonprofit here in Chicago. I live with my partner and my 3 little guys, who, if you hear someone storming in, it's probably them. Yeah, I don't know what else to say about myself.
What is your work in applied research? Like, what specifically do you look into?
So I specifically kind of look at systems monitoring, systems evaluations. I work on a few projects now with different systems, as specifically in the state of Illinois. I'm looking at a project with DCFS right now, looking at a few other things. And then like other like evaluations of nonprofits, just to make sure that they're how can they improve things, how can they make things better, but it's more or less from like a participatory lens. So I heavily engage like a program's participants or a company's staff or people who have gone through a certain system, to kind of get their perspectives on how things worked for them, if certain policies were followed, what can be improved, and just make recommendations going from there. So I'll use like mixed methods in a lot of the studies that I do. So that'll be both like qualitative, quantitative methods to try and come up with recommendations and tell companies or systems or organizations like the story on behalf of the people they serve. So
that sounds amazing. Thank you for all the work you do.
Thank you.
So yeah, Jamela, like last week, like last Friday, Becky and I were discussing, we were discussing, let me just put us in gallery view now. Like we were discussing what, we were talking about like supporting like the Black Lives Matter movement, but then also balancing that with self-care. And you've just said a bit about your life that lets me know you're going through, like you've got a lot of hats to wear, a lot to balance. So you got three children, your partner, you're working, and it sounds like working from home. And then of course this is in the midst of a global pandemic, and then all the news just about the past few weeks, all the like police cases with Black folks. I'm just like, what is like a day in the life looking like for you these days? Because some people, I mean, for some people it's like, oh, I got to learn how to bake banana bread, and I mean, you sound like you got a lot of plates in the air.
I do. Like, I'm so jealous of those banana bread baking locos. Like, I'm just like, why can't I be you? I want baked banana bread. I got walnuts. I got some super ripe bananas in there that are probably just gonna go to waste because I don't have time to bake banana bread. I don't know, like I try to keep us all on a schedule, but like I'm also like keeping in mind that like one, going through a pandemic is like collective trauma. To the protests and everything that's collective trauma. And I have like little minds that are kind of like, what in the hell is all of this? And like just being mindful of what like everyone is kind of experiencing right now. I'm just kind of letting the wind blow where it blows, to be honest with you. Like they have homeschool. And then like, unfortunately, it seems like the school district decided that they are going to give grades. And so it went from this really like loose format to like more strict adherence and goals being met. So it's like teaching them, but then with work, like since, like I said, a lot of my work is participatory and requires us to engage one-on-one with people, that's become a little strained and bizarre in the sense that like everything has to be done virtually. And so it's trying to figure out, okay, like interviews can be traumatizing, certain discussions can be traumatizing. how do we hold these conversations when I can't reach out and give you a hug if you were triggered some kind of a way? You know, so like there's that going on. And, you know, then like I'm not even gonna get started on like the mountains of laundry that are like staring at me from the corner right now. Like it is like spinning plates, but you know, like I am like naturally a laid back person. And so like I didn't even think about it until you kind of just listed everything, Lindsay.
No, I'm reminding you of everything.
Now I'm like panicking. But no, I'm just teasing. But like I just kind of like my focus is getting my kids set up early in the day. And then I kind of like make time for work and myself in the afternoon and evenings, and whatever doesn't get done, there's always tomorrow.
Yeah. Yeah. Take it one day at a time. Like, so, I mean, and also what, because you got 3 little ones, like what ages or grades are we dealing with right now?
We have a 10-year-old in 4th grade, an 8-year-old in 2nd grade, and a 5-year-old who would have been finishing up pre-K had this not, you know,
Mm-hmm.
spun
Yeah.
out of control the way that it did.
No. And so I guess in terms of, so like when it comes to like, say, for example, like you just listed everything to Becky and I that Becky and me, what you do with your like job. And then, so like, how then has homeschooling then impacted like the career part of your life or vice versa?
I mean, I'm thankful that I have a really understanding like supervisor and team that is just kind of like, you know, like over the past year, I think they've made an effort to like be more trauma informed and really recognizing that like having to stay at home because someone breathing on you could kill you. You know, it's like, you know, more important than like you being and working yourself to the bone. And so they've been really relaxed and flexible with me. I'm incredibly thankful for that because I'm just kind of like, today, guys, it's not working. It's not working. So, I mean, like, I wouldn't say that it's like negatively impacted it as much as like I kind of have learned to appreciate my team a little bit more because everyone is like really flexible with me, and I appreciate that.
Yeah, I mean, I would say like you, I'm currently with an employer where there has been more flexibility, especially also as I've told people, like with my cancer treatment, like, cause you know, it's like cancer treatment. And then like, again, all this other context that we're all dealing with, but of course, like on different ships. And no, it's funny though, because when I talk to colleagues or friends I know who are at other employers, this whole like, oh, more relaxed thing is not universal. Like, you know, other people, I mean, well, first there are the people that still go in for work. But then even for ones who work from home, like I'm hearing from some other colleagues in my industry, like now they're working more so because it's almost like, oh, now that you don't have the commuting time, there's an expectation that you then would have more flexibility for this work. So I guess I'm kind of heartened to at least hear that with you, with like, okay, there's a flexibility with that environment.
Yeah, like there's flexibility. Like I do feel like I have a lot more people reaching out to me who like normally would not say anything to me. And I'm like, what is this? But like in terms of like my more like the folks I work more closely with, like they're like, it's okay, just let me know like what's going on today, and you know, we'll figure it out.
Yeah, that's really interesting because I have some friends who their employers have kind of panicked with this whole idea of letting their employees work from home. So they have to send like full reports, like what did they accomplish? What were their goals? Where like they have to send these full reports every day. And they've said that simply filling out the report alone is such an onerous, is that the what's that word? Onerous? That's the right word. Onerous. There we go. Thank you. Onerous task. And so that takes up like a big portion of their day. And I can't even imagine if I had to do that because my day's so start, stop.
Yeah.
Which I think is how a lot of people are right now. Everything start, stop.
Yeah.
Well, like it's also to Jamela's point, like let's just admit we're all like, there's a collective trauma, but then also like to what you're saying, Becky, there's this whole like I don't know, like we need to prove that we're still being productive or more productive. And it's like no pressure in a time where there are a lot of furloughs and layoffs, but but we need to know what you're producing. We need to know who you are as a worker. Yeah. But yeah, and but I also want to say, like, one of the reasons I thought to like reach out to Jamela, because like actually, so yeah, the way we know each other is that we went to the same college, and we're about the same age as Mark Zuckerberg. So we've stayed in touch through Facebook, and I feel like our communication through the years has been, like so many people, like more like of this, like commenting on each other's posts, which is cool. I mean, it's how I've stayed in the loop with you and vice versa. And and I've noticed that you've been passionate a lot about, like, I mean, you're like, I think like Becky and myself, like you think a lot about the world. Like just period, like you don't necessarily need a move, like a grand movement or some like extreme event to be like, oh, I think I need to look at this. And so I just thought, like, wow, you got a lot of like, I've just seen like just the cycles of your thinking with what you share online. And I'm just wondering, like, okay, because when I think about everything that you're doing with work, with your family, like, I guess when it comes to these online interactions, or maybe in-person interactions with people, with the few people you see, what's up? I guess in some ways, do you feel like it's making, like, for some people that online interaction makes them feel good, like, oh, community, like other people out there caring about what I care about. But I also know for other people, it's also triggering, and it's like, oh, this is so much, I need to like, shut off. Like, I guess what's been your relationship with that? Because it's already been an issue for a lot of people pre-pandemic, but then throw in the pandemic, throw in recent events like George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, everyone else. We're like, I guess we're like, what's your relationship with that those online interactions?
I mean, I think I'm somewhere between like, this is triggering and like, oh my God, this thing just happened now, or like this person said this messed up thing. But like, I also feel like maybe why things are triggering to me may not be why they're triggering to others. Like, some things are triggering to me because it's kind of like, how could people not know this? Like, how could, like, it's making me feel like I was in this strange little bubble of like the world and how things work. And when people say things like, I didn't know, things about like the Tulsa massacre, I didn't even know that happened. And I'm kind of like, not to be judgy, but like, why not? Is it because you never pursued it because you didn't have to? And now that everything is like blowing up, you want to know about it, and so you're seeking it out. But why is it about this right now that's making you feel like you should know about this stuff? Like, I've posted about all types of stuff. I'm pretty sure that's like popped up several million times. Like, did you just scroll by it because it's like, oh, that's a Black people issue? I'm just, I'll go laugh at the picture of the baby saying something funny, but like, I won't read this, you know what I mean? And so it's kind of like, what is the role of like social media and all this? Like, if you're my friend and I'm posting this because it's concerning me, like, I would like for you to read it. I'm not sharing it to be like, get some likes. It's like, oh no, this could affect us all. And like, now it's happening. The affect us all effect is like rolling out now. And I don't know, it's just a little disappointing. Like, come on, everybody. Like,
no, I hear that, because it's also like, no, it's interesting. Like, I'm someone who's had to work on social media more for like a volunteer side gig in the past. And it's funny, when I'm thinking about social media management in that context, it is about likes, it is about comments, it's about like, how many more followers do you get in this platform, that platform, and how do you balance them? And like, I just feel like, okay, if someone's looking at it from like, it's, I mean, I would say an organizational or a company standpoint, they have to like think about the optics and the numbers. But like, yeah, I think for like people, like individuals like ourselves, whether it gets 1 or 100 likes, like if I'm posting this, it's because I think it's important, right?
Right.
And for some of the, I guess with what's on your mind lately, like I know that you like to post and share a lot and like engage in real dialogues with people both online and in person. Well, when it's allowed, like like which are, I guess, what are the stories or what are the issues that are most salient in your mind right now? Because there's such an influx. It's like what is like, I guess, been at the top of mind for you in these past few days?
I think in the past few days, it's kind of like, what's next? Like, I mean, like you've probably like seen this from my post, Lindsay, that like I am not really a fan of how elections are headed in the fall. And like this may be like, I mean, I don't think it's controversial. I think it's true, but people have problems with me saying that like we're voting between two white supremacists. I can't phrase it any other kind of way.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like you got white supremacists with like, I don't know, in your face, and then you got white supremacy light, you know, the kind that makes everyone kind of comfortable and feel like they can get along with their day, you know, but the undertone of that is like the 1994 crime bill and saying that, you know, Black families may need social workers because they don't know how to parent, you know? And so like when you're looking at that and you're like, okay, I clearly know who I have to vote for because checks and balances are important. But what does that mean for the protests that are going on right now? What does that mean in terms of reform? What does that mean in terms of equity? You know, what is this going to look like? And it can look like a lot of different things, but I think I'm concerned that like kind of this global unity surrounding, you know, the basically the built up consequences of like what white supremacy has done globally, it's kind of coming to a forefront. And it's like, depending on who's president, is that going to fizzle out? You know, is it going to stop? And then everyone is just going to go back to being comfortable with those of us who are allowed to be comfortable. Is that going to happen? Or is everyone going to keep saying, no, like, we don't want to be comfortable anymore. We want to fix all of the systemic racism that has happened and has caused an inequity that not only do we see in the United States, but like there's been protests in Berlin and Paris and London and, you know, all New Zealand, you know,
too.
Canada,
Brazil just recently had some protests as well.
Brazil, you know, like I saw the photo of like Montreal and I was just like moved. And it's kind of like, is this all going to go to waste? And I think that's kind of like something that's like playing in the back of my head. And I hate to be so cynical. I used to be such like an optimist and bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. Now I'm kind of like, you know, like are we really going to do something now? Like, what is Congress going to do? Like, how are people going to vote? You know, like not only for the president, but there's like some senatorial seats up where some folks need to go. Like, you know, I won't name them, but they need to go. You know, and so it's just kind of like, you know, what are people going to do to kind of put everyone in power's feet to the fire to not let this be a waste?
Mm-hmm. No, that's real. That's real. Like I'm like Becky and I were talking about this because, you know, obviously there's systemic issues, not just with what happens in police in like with police relations, but name an institution. We like I'm basically preaching to the choir right now. And, you know, last week Becky and I were talking about like, you know, at least on an individual level, what can we do? Like some of the things I was saying is like, yeah, there were donations, and then like at least like, you know, I made some donations to people, like to places that I thought like, oh, could like organizations that really center themselves on these issues. But I was also being honest where it's like, man, I just know so many people who are personally impacted or might be in neighborhoods that are so heavily affected by what the state of our country that in some ways, even if I were to turn off media, social media, like I'm still having, you know, when I think about who's in my circle, in some ways just being supportive in itself is sometimes like the most practical thing I could do. I mean, I was joking with Becky last week, like, I'm pretty sure there are going to be some anti-racist book clubs now if there aren't already. And so,
and there are.
Yeah, I mean, and so, yeah, I'm thinking like especially because you, like you, and I think this is part of like what gravitates me toward talking to you is like, you're such a systemic thinker. Like, what also then does that mean for you in your individual life? Because damn, there's so many ways, there's so many things to pay attention to now. Like, how do you make it digestible on a daily basis?
That's a hard question. Like, I feel like I have indigestion right now. It's like stuck right here. And I'm like, I need like a civil society Maalox or something. Like, I don't really, like I need something to help like push all of this down. But like, I mean, like, just like, even like thinking about like my educational background, like a part of the reason why I think of things like on this kind of macro scale is like I was international studies and then I have my master's in
Me
international
too. We were
public
all
service.
international.
So it's like, IS. So it just kind of like, I always frame things like, okay, here's like this group of people like in this corner, but like their experiences are the result of this, I'll say medium-sized experience, which is the result of this larger thing that's been happening. And so like, I don't like, yes, it's time to put people's like individual selves, like hold a mirror up to your behavior and think about how you've been complicit and try and do something, like there's that part to it. But it's like in the larger scheme of things, right, there's a larger, more an uphill battle, in my opinion, that is at hand in terms of like targeting the larger systems that have created the environment that we're in now. And there's so many different systems at hand, right? Like you have neoliberalism, you have white supremacy, you have, even like within like the realm of like international development, like, which is like the consequence of like neoliberalism, like that you have to address, that kind of feeds into like cultural norms and ideologies, right? Like even the whole idea of pulling oneself up by their bootstraps, like that's capitalist bull, you know what I mean? It's like the people who have shoes can pull their themselves up, but what about the people who don't even have shoes? You're gonna hand them some shoelaces and say, figure it out? Yeah. Like and so like I think that's my larger thought. It's like, okay, we can do this individual self-reflection and come together, but it's like we're coming together, right? Like globally, everyone is coming together. But now that energy and that power that comes in the collective, how are we going to shift it to those who can actually really make the policy changes, the systemic changes that need to happen accountable? If that means voting people out or staying in the streets and waving signs and doing what people feel they need to do to heal and get I should say, systems attention on what needs to change, then like, how can that be protected then? How can we make sure that the collective power doesn't fizzle out in face of, systems trying to satiate something, like I saw some, I think Nancy Pelosi just like kind of, proudly stood in front of the cameras and was like, we have our police reform bill, and it's like they won't be able to do this anymore, they won't be able to do that anymore. But it's like no one's addressing the crime bill. Why? Like that thing is a piece of garbage that has like caused a big chunk of the problems that people are in the streets marching against now. So like, why can't we unpack that? Like, don't give me some new bill when you have one that needs to be thrown out. Why is the Voting Rights Act constantly being gutted? Mm-hmm. And restriction to voting is becoming like more of a norm. Yeah. Like how can we make the Voting Rights Act more permanent with all of its pieces that prevent gerrymandering, that prevent, voter suppression? How can we fix that? this
I
is how
think
we make things more equitable. Go on, sorry.
no, I'm everything that you're saying is what I have been meditating on for the last week. And I'm like, you know, all of the caffeine fueled enlightenedness people were sitting around France going, the system's broken. How do we fix this? And I kind of feel like this might be our enlightenment moment where we go, okay, so what we've been doing was better than what we did in the past. But now let's all collectively think, how can we leverage technology? Like, how can we make voting on a cell phone be a thing? How can we make sure everyone has a cell phone so they can do it? They can scroll through all the issues. They can text their representatives, everything on an app. Who knows? But like, we need to figure out how to actually bring the power down to the granular level so we're not electing people. And again, that electing of people only happens by those who have the time to really learn who's running. And then those people running only cater to certain communities that are going to vote. So how do we flip this system? Democracy was an improvement on what was there. But I do think that now we're hitting this moment where the people have a voice, and unfortunately, it's social media. And I think that we're all starting to realize we're not alone in our feelings. And so it's going to take some creative thinking, but bringing it down to that granular level. And maybe it means like we reduce salaries for senators and we pay ourselves to 1 day a week to review things and vote. And that's our job for that day because we're going to be our own representatives. I don't know. But I think we're at that moment where we're realizing that no matter what we try to do to fix this thing, and we keep coming out with new bills, and I think we just need to rethink the entire system because it's time. And that's okay. It's not a bad thing. It's a good thing.
No, I think it's a good thing. Like, I mean, like, you know, like the way things are, it had like a good, like 200 some odd year run. You know, like that, like, you know what? That's like, that's some time, you know, but it's not working. And like, you keep trying to make something work that at its inception was not equitable.
Yes, our Constitution specifically was designed to provide freedom and liberty and the pursuit of happiness to a select group of people who were landowners and power holding. So yes, then we upgraded it to include women at some point. We upgraded it to include Black people at 3/5 of a person, which still, that was an upgrade. Like, think about that. So if our system went from not including to upgrading partially, then to being like, well, I guess, but we're still going to include all of these other caveats that make it difficult for individual people to truly have their voices heard. I think it's time for us to reconsider, like, how can we do this completely differently? And it's going to involve lots of thinkers, but we've got the internet to connect us all together to think.
So it's interesting, like, so actually, yeah, we've been talking a lot about voting, like, you know, Jamela, you keep mentioning voting people out, and then, you know, just also talking about the bills and everything. You know, I was actually talking to one of my friends on social media, and I think I mentioned something about the whole voting aspect, like obviously for this upcoming fall. This is someone, and I've seen articles for it too, people are questioning, are we gonna be able to vote? I mean, I don't know if that's just me being, again, cynical, but this is a friend who I would say has consistently been on point and ahead of the curve in like seeing what change will or will not happen. And I'm not gonna lie, it's been in the back of my brain. And Becky, for these past videos, I've been trying not to bring it up because I'm like, no. But I mean, when I start seeing Vox and like other articles about this, I'm like, oh God, like, I don't know.
Play out already, like in places where it's not safe to go vote, they're like, whatever, we're not closing the polls, you gotta come, good luck. Like, it'll be interesting to see what does end up happening. I think, I don't know. I don't know. Tech has to be the answer, I think. But I don't know how we get everyone to feel comfortable with that idea, because, I mean, there's been countless movies about how there were votes tampered with and it's part of our drama. So since it's part of our drama, people see it as the reality.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think my sister and I, maybe back in January, when like the threat of like novel coronavirus making its way to the States, she called me and she's like, Trump is going to suspend elections. You know that, right? Like, he's going to use this as an excuse to not have elections. And I'm like, no. But then it's like, it kind of makes sense because that's who he is and that's who like his circle is. And I don't want to believe it. But then like when we had our primary elections here, like in Chicago, last minute, like I kid you not, last minute, they changed people's polling places.
No, I don't know how I missed this. Maybe, okay, so yeah, I mean, I'm not surprised in general, but I didn't know that in Chicago that was the case.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
They changed people's polling places. And so like luckily like my neighborhood, the polling place was like the polling place and they were like really forward. Like they even like had like, I don't know, like a drive-by like poll where they had like the little machine like outside of like the community church where the voting normally happens. But like in the surrounding areas, which are like heavily Latino, heavily like other like immigrant groups, like they moved the polling place. And so like where your polling place would have been like a neighborhood church, it got moved to like the Park District. And so people were like heading home from work and were like, if they waited until the last minute, and by they, I mean me, I'm one of those people who waited, like I'm being transparent now. If they were like, okay, after work, I'll go, and they go to their polling place, a lot of people found out their polling place was closed. And they had to go like what would have been like 20 minutes or so on foot to get to where their new polling place was. But it's already like, 6:45. They're not going to make it there by 7 to vote. And so a lot of folks just went home. And so in these strange ways, and then like I think it was Wisconsin, I'm not sure, I think it was Wisconsin or Michigan, where folks were like they were arguing with the Supreme Court to like extend either the voting hours or like reschedule the day of the primary elections until they figured out how to do so like safely or like what was going to be allowed. And the Supreme Court was like, no, it's fine, everyone can vote today. Which like then caused like these wild lines, and like so a lot of people once again did not get to vote. And then there's the issue of the fellow in Texas. I think he waited like some 7.5 hours in line.
I heard that.
And they tried to turn him away, and he was like, no, I was in line before the polls closed. You cannot do this to me. You have to let me vote.
And not everyone knows that that's the law either. That's a big issue there.
Mm-hmm.
Or it's just even waiting that long. Like I remember when I voted in the primaries in Massachusetts, that was like after my mastectomy, and like I didn't have the energy, but I have a friend who works in politics. He's like, no, I'm taking you. And like, I mean, because otherwise I was like, I don't have the energy, but thankfully I had someone to push me along. I mean, I also just think about people, like if it's not their work, it's a vulnerable health condition, it's scheduling, it's all of that. But like, and Jamila, just to clarify, so like it's funny, like I think people like, I want to like actually, because when you say at the last minute people's polling polling places were closed, I guess to be more specific to people, because I know we use the term last minute like colloquially a lot, if I'm saying it correctly, like tell me what last minute was for you in terms of these changes to your polling place.
Last minute, I would say, okay, so I went to vote at about like 4:45 because I get off of work a little early. And then I think by like 5:30 or so is when I found out that some people's polling places were closed and they had to go to some other location. So like, I mean, some people may have known earlier in the day, but from folks within my circle, they didn't realize that their polling place had changed until about an hour, between 30 minutes to an hour before voting ended.
Damn. No, it's like, it's interesting because like, I think a lot of people like, they might like hear about these things like on a national level or this state, that city. But yeah, I mean, I don't think a lot of people always hear it from their individual friends, like, hey, my polling place or my friend's polling place got switched up. So so no, I mean, like, thanks for like keeping me in the loop with that. I mean, well, I have so many words on it. I don't know if I would say them here, but yes, I have words. Well, it's bullshit. That's it.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Word. That's the only word needed.
Yeah, it's the only word. I mean, right now, like, things are just nuts. I mean, I know, and I also know, like, I know where we are with time, and your kids may or may not like need you soon.
No one's pounded on my door or like stuck their fingers in the bottom of the door with a note. So I think I'm okay.
So like, but also, I guess like, you know, just knowing that we might have like, yeah, we will have like a few minutes left or so. I mean, are there other issues, topics that have been on your mind and you just think are like worth putting out there for people? Because, you know, it's interesting. Becky, did you text me? Was it on Friday or Saturday to say that your spouse's grandma watches us?
Yeah, we had a virtual birthday party for her 94th birthday party.
Woohoo!
And yeah, it was awesome. And she's like never video called before. And she's just like, wow, this is like being in person, but in my house. Like, she was fascinated. It was awesome. And then she goes, and Becky, I've been watching your discussions. So she might be reading this. So hi, Nana, if you're watching this. Hello, Nana. But it was awesome getting her experiences, given that she's 94. She lived in Massachusetts and New Hampshire most of her life, now lives in Florida. And just simply like asking her, like, how did this experience compare to the race riots that you were alive for? Or you growing up in New Hampshire and Massachusetts, like, what was your life like? And I'm really looking forward to sitting down with her and having more conversations with her about that, because I don't really have anyone at that age in my life, in my immediate family. So it was kind of cool to hear that or Chris's Nana was watching these videos. So yeah.
That's so cool.
Because no, I mean, it's like, I was not, I'm not gonna lie, that was not necessarily the person I had in mind with being a faithful viewer of this. But like, you know, I was thinking like about our immediate friends, but it's like, yeah, we put this online and then your connections hear about it. I mean, so like, oh, and just for context, Jamela, like, you know, I live outside of Boston, you know, Becky's in New Hampshire, you're in Chicago. So I guess I also just brought up Nana just as an example of how, yeah, like, people are starting to, like, just through social media, like, it's not always about who your direct contacts are. And people are starting to engage in these discussions. I mean, that was the purpose of this, just for people I know with very rich, distinct perspective, just coming together and having a thoughtful conversation. Because that's what keeps happening on social media, right? They keep saying, we have to have more discussion. We have to have more discussion about these important topics or people won't move to action.
Yeah. And that's how all the Black Lives Matter vigils and protests that I've been to so far have ended. Like, your goal as an ally, because again, I'm in New Hampshire, so it's mostly white, and people at these events are mostly white. Go home and talk to your racist uncle. Go home and email your boss and ask what are the policies at your work, and hold people accountable, and then suggest other alternatives when people are like, I don't know, it's broken, but you know, so yeah.
No, yeah, so I guess I bring it up just because I'm thinking, like, if there are like other, like, so Jamela, like, if you think there are other issues or topics that you think are worth raising that I just haven't had the brain to ask, since my brain has a lot in here right now and it's overwhelmed, like, what else do you think is worth you know, discussing, aside from all these systemic issues that we all need to collectively work on? Or if there's certain issues you think are worth highlighting more. Like, I appreciate the talk about voting, the fact, like, we have limited options with who we're voting for right now with president. Like, what else do you think is worth mentioning?
I'm a big history buff, and like I briefly touched on it like earlier, but like everybody, like, history is not 5th grade social studies. And if you just leave your, like, no wonder why all of this is like shocking, because if you're stuck in 5th grade social studies, you think we're this melting pot of the world and everyone gives hugs and there are Care Bears who give us candy. Like, no, it's not like that. It's not like that at all. And like, if you just like open yourself up, like, read like some real good history or op-eds or something, you know what I mean? Stop with the YouTube videos, y'all. Can we read? make reading great again, like
Yes. Yes.
make reading, like if I'm gonna be on my soapbox right now, like if we could stop with the youth, anyone can go on YouTube and just say whatever. I mean, I guess we can say the same about us right now, like we're like saying whatever, but like I promise you, if you can find a book on anything we talked about today, like we are not pulling stuff out of our rumps. I try to think about things like in terms of like history a lot, which is why like a lot of things like are kind of predictable and kind of understandable, because like there's nothing new under the sun. Somewhere, anywhere, this has happened, and the more you kind of inform yourself about like what has happened in your own country as well as like overseas, the more you can kind of like empathize and figure things out. Like I think one of the biggest things right now that's getting on my nerves is when people, I can never understand what it's like. I can't. And it's like, yes, you can. You can understand. Like, have you ever just been bullied by someone? You don't know why. You can't put a finger on it. They're just messing with you and they won't stop. Like, imagine if that's like perpetually what is happening to you day in and day out, and that is what it is like to be Black. And I can't stress that anymore. You do understand. Don't take that cop out to say, I don't understand. You know what it's like to be mistreated. But just think about when you say you're mistreated and someone brushes it off and says, well, maybe you did something. Have you tried talking to them? And it's like, they're making me feel horrible. Why would I talk to them? Or, I can't understand what it's like as, a white person. And it's like, well, I mean, like, if you're a woman, have you ever had someone like not treat you well because of your gender? If that's the case, then you can empathize, you can understand, and take that energy and take that feeling that can relate to like an experience that you had where you felt like you were oppressed, where you felt like someone was riding your back and you could not put your finger on it other than they just did not like the cut of your jib. And that is what it is always like. And if you can feel that, and if you can relate with that, then next time, a Black person or another person of color says, I think they treated me like that because of how I look, or because they're assuming I am from here. Think about that moment, of someone riding your back with no explanation and say, I'm sorry that happened to you. I think that's the big thing. Like going back on that, nuclear level of like individual self-reflection, like look at it from that perspective, and then read about like Black history in the United States. Just read about it.
Wow. No, thank you so much for sharing that. And it's funny, right? Because I think a lot of responses to this have been, oh, I need to educate myself. I need to educate myself more. And yes, no one loves books and documentaries and all that stuff more than me, but it's also not just like, I guess education isn't only just this intellectual exercise. It also like just has to be like, not just internalized in your mind, but also in your heart, right? And that's where it comes to the empathy piece. Because I mean, yeah, it's like at a certain point, how many books does someone have to read? How many documentaries does someone have to watch? How many like thoughtful discussions like this does someone have to have before they're like, okay, now I'm really going to have the momentum to actually put this into action. Like, this is why, like, especially working in higher ed, I'm a huge fan of experiential education. It's like, okay, you read a book, you wrote an essay on it. Now what? Okay. Like, how do you go from the enlightenment to the empathy piece that you're talking about, Jamela? Mm-hmm. I don't know if I have any other questions after that. Becky, do you have any other questions or comments before we start wrapping up?
I do, but they're so off topic from what we've been discussing. So I'm going to save them for another conversation, because I want to talk about like your experience as a parent and the school and all of that with your kids. But I don't know if there's enough time, but like, I just found it interesting when you were like, they switched from not grading to now giving grades. And my school was giving grades. It was very clear from the get-go, and I'm a high school teacher, so I know that that's different. But again, we can save that for another conversation, or if you have time, I think it's very interesting to get that experience.
I do have a bit of time. So like initially, like we got like emails from like our kids' teachers, like this is gonna be really relaxed. We understand that like you're trying to operate in a pandemic and people are working and it's difficult. And so we were like, okay, so like we kind of asked like, well, okay, so for these grade levels, like what do they need to be ready for next year? And we'll like work on it. And it was more like consulting, right? Like the teachers would tell us like what they need to know and give us a few assignments. And so, you work with your kid and they were like, nothing's going to be graded. Like, we're just like going to give like credit for you doing things. And so then I guess the CPS like sent out like their formal announcement with this very odd grading system that's grades but not grades. So it's like, if your grade improves or stays the same, you will get a letter grade. If your grade drops, you'll get pass, fail. You'll get pass. If you fail though, you'll get an incomplete, which would then make you have to like go to summer school to like complete this stuff. So all of a sudden, after this announcement were made, we start getting like daily assignments for gym. We start getting daily assignments for like music and art, like, which is great. But like what happened is like the kids' day literally got blocked out for like that whole like 7-hour school day. And it's like, but I have to work. Like we don't eat if I don't work. But like I want my children to learn at the same time.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like I feel so bad for especially my 4th grader. I think I feel the most like apologetic towards him because I'm like, look, buddy, I'm sorry. We were really lax with this. Like I was happy if he worked on some math problems and read for like an hour. But now it's like writing and I think every week he's had like a science project that he's had to submit. Every 2 weeks he's had like a social studies project that he's had to submit. So it's like you're going through this 7-hour work school day at home, and then you have homework. So it's kind of like home that's like supposed to be like this respite from like all of that, is just work day in and day out, and you're not socializing with your peers. Like they're in martial arts, and so like they've had to like do that like online, which like I'm really thankful for. But it's like you don't have like Dominic is like a green belt, so like he's at the point where he's sparring now. So like he doesn't have it.
When to spar with?
Like I'm done. Like once he got to that point, it's like I'm not practicing with you anymore. Like he kicked me once, and I'm like, I can't do this. I bruise very easily, and that kick hurt. So like he doesn't have that interaction, and so like I kind of see it taking a toll on their morale. Just having to do like so much work and not really having other children to be with. And I just feel sorry for them. It's like I'm sorry, but you have to do this. Like I thought everything was gonna be pass fail, and I would have been really happy with you just doing pass work. But like now that they're recording grades but not recording them at the same time, I would rather your grades not drop from where they were. So
is CPS having some type of like parent teacher administrator panel? Because I know here in New Hampshire they have an advisory team now that parents and teachers and basically anybody in the community supposedly can join. I haven't looked as much into it because I'm surviving as well as a teacher right now. I finally finished getting some grades done. I'm happy. But I know I still have to put in all the comments and all this other stuff. And I have a couple kids who didn't turn things in, so I'm still waiting for that. But I just think this is a really great moment for school districts to really sit down with parents and be like, hey, so what was your experience like? How can we fix this? Because next year we don't know what's going to happen still, but we're all anticipating it'll at least be hybrid, in person and remote. don't know how that's going to work yet, but we're creative. The teachers are just absolutely incredible. Everyone I've worked with has just been like, all right, let's figure this problem out. Go. We had 3 days to come up with an entire plan. And I feel like my school did a great job. At least the teachers I've been interacting with have. So, but we all have feedback on how we can make this better, and really just what's important. Is it important that they completed that quiz, or is it more important that end of the day that they actually understood the concept? So we're a competency-based school, so I'm learning more about how to teach in a competency-based school. I will fully admit that this year was like sink or swim because it was my first year there. But I'm looking forward to rethinking a lot of my instruction next year, and I know a lot of teachers are as well, because it can't be 7 hours of constant working, because that's not healthy, right? So learning how to be more flexible is something that I think we're going to all learn, and I think education's really going to benefit from that if we can do it properly, and again, taking into account individual experiences, because if one person speaks up and says that this was really rough for these reasons, there's got to be another person who feels that way. They just don't have time to come in and make their voices heard. So if those exist, make sure you're involved. I'm sure you will be.
Yeah, like I think like so like I think one thing with CBS is the schools are like really disjointed. So like I think schools like aren't really like harmonized in terms of like curriculum and in terms of, and so like I've been getting like emails from like my kids' school that are like, you know, we want to have this discussion, but it's not really talking about like any of this. It's just like trying to move things forward as is, which is kind of like, I don't want to go to that. and then, you know, it's like we had parent teacher conferences at like report card time, and like we were telling the teacher like, look, our kids are stressed out, like there's got to be a way to bring it back. And like the teacher seemed really frustrated that like she wanted to bring it back, but it's like we have to move forward basically with our curriculum because this is how it's been arranged, which is like, okay, fine. But it's like, I mean, I was a homeschool kid, and I think tops we had like 3.5 hours of school a day. And so I'm always like, you don't need this. Need this full 7 hours. Like
most of school is socialization. It's learning how to interact with other people and how to manage your different emotions and how to like school is so much more than the book material. And honestly, my Spanish class is almost 100% community. Like if you're not a productive member of our community, and by productive, I mean, you're not holding us all back. You're willing to participate in some capacity, whatever is comfortable for you. And you're supporting the learning of your peers, and you're a good like citizen of this class. Like that's the big part of my class. And now I can't do that online. Like I had to completely rethink everything. So yeah, it's interesting to hear the parent perspective, because I've had some parent teacher meetings just to get some feedback, and it seems like across the board, most of the parents are expressing the same exact concerns that you are as well, Jamela. So something for our educators who are watching and our administrators who might be watching to really think about.
Yeah, no, I don't know, like I think they're learning stuff, but I'm worried about the retention a little bit, because it is just like moving from point A to point B with the checklist. And so like I'm kind of like, do you get this? Do you understand it? And they'll be like, yeah. And then it's like, okay. And the next week assignments will come in, which are like building off the previous week, and they're like, oops, I don't know how to do this. And I'm like, can I have like a little space at least to make sure they understand it before we're like moving on to like the next goal, you know? And so I think that's what's worrying me the most about, like, I want them to be able to understand what the assignments are, but it's like, we don't have the lesson plans. We don't have the materials. So it's kind of like, okay, I want to press pause in this section a bit because they're not getting it.
And that's what like Khan Academy was so great when they came up with the idea of Khan Academy, because you can hit pause, you can rewind, you can watch it again, you can click on extra activities if you need them. You can just jump to the quiz and take the quiz if you're like, yeah, I actually watched a documentary on this 2 weeks ago. I know all about the Civil War and what they're going to ask me in this thing.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to jump to the quiz and then focus on the things I don't know. Like, I really think that this, like, having pre-work for students to be able to assess where their weak points are is going to be what's going to be more powerful as we move forward. So it's like a pre-test, here's the material, here's all sorts of things you can do, and then a post-test. If we have to do testing, I'm trying to build a self-reflective curriculum this summer. So rated based on how well they reflect on their growth. So we'll see if that works.
So I'm looking at time,
yes,
and I know that in a few minutes I have to go to a work meeting because yes, this is lunchtime. But
I'm graduating today, so I've got to go to graduation.
But yeah, I guess just in another, in the last minute or two, no, it was really great hearing your perspectives, Jamela. Like, is there any one last tidbit or two you wanted to share with us before we sign off? Again, like, Becky and I are so happy because, like, as much as I love talking to Becky all the time, it's just nice to have some variety with like experiences, because, like, neither of us have children right now, and it's interesting to hear a parent's perspective. It's been a long time since I've lived in Chicago, and you're telling me what's going on over there. So are there any last tidbits you wanted to share?
No, just if any other parents are listening, solidarity. Because this has been like an interesting ride. It's been an interesting ride, and I hope I have not traumatized my children.
I know that you are doing as amazing job as anyone can be in this situation. And thank you for taking time to just share your story, your experiences with us in this moment. And yeah, maybe we can chat with you again, but I'm gonna head to my meeting, and I will talk to both of you sometime soon, okay?
All right, bye. Thank you for having me.
Bye, ladies.
Bye.